All right, hello everybody. As always, it is your host Rod McGregor. This is the One Puck Short podcast. A little bit in the raw today. I'm on the road, as you can probably tell from the noises around me. But I had a podcast for a little bit. This week's a little bit funky as well, so thought we'd go, down a slightly different route. Harks back to the roots of the One Puck Short podcast, because I always used to record new episodes in my car on the way to work when the podcast originally started. So here we are, and there's a few bits and pieces I just wanted to cover to keep things ticking over and so forth, really. But congratulations to the Sheffield Steelers. They won the British Elite League title at the weekend. They beat Nottingham on Saturday and away at Fife on Sunday to secure the title again. They won it last year, of course, as well. And I went to the game Saturday in Sheffield, and they played reasonably well against the Nottingham Panthers. I actually thought the Panthers were slightly the better team in the first and the third period. Not significantly, but a little bit. But Sheffield got the important goal in the first. Zach Fitzgerald ejected, tripping over my words, for a hit to the head. He got a match penalty in the second period. They'd given the Panthers a 5-minute power play, but lost 2 minutes of that to a frankly stupid penalty conceded by the Panthers. Mr. Quick, who amusingly got the man of the match award at the end, he whacked the goaltender's stick. Shane Madalore lost his stick. Quick tried to knock it back to him using his own player stick, and that isn't a legal equipment penalty. Good call by Tom Darnell, despite people booing for some bizarre reason. So 5-minute power play interrupted there by a poor penalty, and Sheffield scored on that resulting Panthers. Well, I say Panthers penalty. It was 4-on-4 at the time. Then they did pull one back, the Panthers, but a few moments later they gave up a 3-on-1 breakaway. I think it was Jeff Legui who converted. No, Rob Dowd, sorry. It was Jeff Legui with the assist. And really, Sheffield kind of never looked back in the second at that point. They scored a fourth later on, and one thing they did very well that Nottingham just didn't do was get traffic in front of Madalore. I was really impressed with Shane Madalore. I think he looked very good. His position was very good. He's not the biggest. He's only about 5'10". But I just didn't see the Steelers beating him straight up. They did an excellent job of getting traffic in front of him, and obviously there was that 3-on-1, which he could have Martin Brodeur in there, and he'd probably still favour the forwards to score in a 3-on-1 situation like that. So, the Steelers did little things like that well, and it was a little bit scrappy at times, but they got the job done. Whereas Nottingham were Arsenal-esque, I think, at times. They tried to move the puck a little bit too much occasionally, looking for the pretty pass. They scored a couple of nice goals in the third to pull it back to 4-3, but in general, broad terms, I just thought they tried to be too pretty at times. They needed something else, and they just didn't seem to be able to break down the Steelers' defence. There was a lot of dump and chase and chip and chase, and they gave possession away far too often for my liking. And I'm talking to John O'Bullard from the Cat's Whiskers after the game, just via private messaging. He said that it's been a problem for a lot of the year with the Panthers, that they just can't break down this Steelers trap, and it's just giving possession away. They must have thought of a plan B by now. And Marek Pinch isn't a very good goaltender in my opinion. He's come away with the league winners medal just because Sheffield have kind of found a way to defend in front of him and clog up lanes, and there's ways and means to beat the trap, but no one has really found a consistent way to do it, especially Nottingham, and they'll be disappointed. They lost Sunday as well to be heading into the playoffs with back-to-back defeats like that. But overall a good game, and as I said, the Panthers might be disappointed. I was a little saddened they didn't throw Cam Janssen out there towards the end, just park him in front of the net. He doesn't have to drop gloves, crush people in corners, just park him. He's a big body, he's a strong guy, just tell him to park himself in front of Pinch. And he's probably going to take a few licks, but he's a tough guy. He can take a couple of hacks and whacks and so forth to just to mix it up a bit. At the end there, they were only one goal down, and it just would have changed up what the Panthers had done for basically sort of 50-55 minutes, bar a couple of moments of madness. And it would have just been something different, but their case wasn't helped by another bad penalty against Quick. 2 minutes for elbowing. I think there was about 6 minutes left in the game, maybe less, and he took that elbowing penalty. Again, good call, bad penalty to take. And yeah, good game though. As I said, congratulations to the Steelers. Also, congratulations to the Basingstoke Bison, who won the English Premier League title. And Chelmsford Chieftains wrapped up the National League Division 1 South several weeks ago now. So that's the 3 league winners, and I'm afraid who won in the North escapes me. I have a feeling it was D-side in one of the conferences, but I apologise if I'm wrong. It escapes me right now. As I said, I'm on the road. But yeah, congratulations to all concerned there. The Elite League playoffs start this weekend. Some good matchups there as well. Belfast Nottingham is the standout one, but Sheffield Coventry could be interesting. Brian Stewart was the Steelers' nemesis in the postseason last year, really. So it's going to be interesting to see if the Steelers can go one better this year and take the league and the playoff title, or if again it's Stewart and the Blaze who upset the apple cart. And on that note, I will move into the Team GB stuff, because Coventry coach Chuck Webber is going to be part of Team GB's coaching crew at the World Championships in April, and some interesting selections in the. It's kind of a warm-up squad. They've got a couple of games against Poland as pre-World Championship warm-ups in, I think it's Nottingham, he says. The second game certainly in Coventry. And I was surprised that Brayhead's Ben Davies didn't make the 28. He's on standby, so if there's injuries or whatever, he's on that reserve list, but I was surprised he didn't make it from the off. Matty Davies, as well, of the Manchester Storm, also misses out, which I think a lot of people are surprised by. Even though there's maybe a slight dip in form at the end of the year, he's generally had a very good year for the Storm. For their first season, can't complain, I don't think. It's gone pretty well for them, given how quickly they had to pull a team together in the summer. I'm sure General Manager Neil Russell and Omar Pasha are very happy with the way things have gone. Maybe, inevitably, and to be expected, disappointed to miss the playoffs, but for a first season, the work they've done in Manchester has, I'm sure, laid some groundwork for future success. But I digress slightly on that point. Davies and Davies both miss out. I was surprised at that, especially Ben Davies, as I said. Ross Venus is in the team. A few people speculated that he is in because he knows Chuck Webber's systems. Obviously, as I said, Webber is one of the assistant coaches for this year's World Championships. But, that only works to a point where other people can adapt to those systems in a short space of time. Team GB don't have a lot of prep time together, and even though Venus, Russ Cowley, I'm no issue with Cowley being there, I think he's a useful player. Cowley, Ashley Tate, those guys may know Webber's systems, but if the other 2, 3, 4 players on their line don't know the system very well, then it breaks down. So, you can question the merit of taking someone like Venus on that premise, though he was okay at the Olympic qualifiers in Cortina. Not great, but not terrible. So, I guess you could make the argument it would be harsh to drop him after one tournament like that. But, I guess this is the thing, that who do you pull in, who do you take out? Obviously, Pete Russell has to get it down to a 23-man squad before the World Championships. So 5 others will lose their place. I guess Thomas Murdy will be one of them. And they'll go with Ben Bounds and Stephen Murphy, because quite frankly there's no one else to go with between the pipes, and then Bounds will get the start, and as I said, there's no other option. And really, and a few people have sort of had a pop at Pete Russell for some of the selections. Again, I could probably disagree with a couple of them, but he's really only got a pool of about 25 to 30 players to choose from anyway at any given time, and that's including some guys in the EPL, and John Weaver's still in that mix. I don't know if that's relevant anymore with Ben O'Connor's emergence, so to speak, and Josh Batch as well. But there's only so many players Russell has at his disposal at a given time, and calling for the team to move on from guys like Tate and Clark is all well and good, but not necessarily easy, especially if you want to achieve success. And there's always the pressure to achieve, and maybe that goes hand in hand with the way the sport is here. Pete Russell's got this small pool to choose from. A lot of players are reasonably similar in the sense that they're hard-working type guys. Some of them have got better hands, so they can play a top 6 role, but we haven't consistently got those finesse kind of guys available to people like Pete Russell and previous coaches even. So, all the organisation in the world isn't going to change that for one tournament. It's a much deeper thing with the need for much more competition. I think across the board, and a little bit more value put on finesse. Mark Garside's been labelled as a defenceman, and of what I've seen of him for the Giants this season, he's been okay on D, and certainly Patrick Smith and David Jimsey from the official Belfast Giants podcast, A View from the Bridge, seem happy with the way he's played on D, but in playing him, they obviously lose his ability in the face-off circle, which is sometimes underrated, I think, in this country. And as I said, just general finesse guys struggle to break into the Elite League because there's that many quality imports who can come in and play that kind of role. You look at Machuar as a prime example of this, Joey Martin things, that they don't necessarily want the Brits to fill those roles. They don't need them to fill those roles. And bar a few exceptions like maybe Robert Dowd and David Clark in years past, a lot of British players aren't employed as big scorers. They're employed as guys to plug in on those top six, in that top six unit and contribute, but play more of a two-way game. Or they're guys who are employed as depth. I think Jason Hewitt is good at what he does, but his longevity in the Elite League is because he's a good depth guy, and he's not going to lose that place on that third line or whatever because an import became available. Whereas someone like Luke Ferrara might get some opportunities on Sheffield's second line, but then all of a sudden, so-and-so Czech player has become available to us. We want him because we want to win, and so Luke gets bumped down. And I'm talking hypothetically, but that's the sort of situation that a lot of British players have sometimes found themselves in, certainly the finesse ones. And I remember talking to Craig Peacock before. He said he was sort of a little bit lucky to have the setup the Giants had at the time because it did allow him as a more finesse-based player to do well for the Giants, and obviously he's had a good career with the team in Belfast. So yeah, it's created a lot of debates again, this GB team, and who should be in, who should be out. Should we move on from older guys like Clark and Tate, and do you give guys like Cowney and Hook a chance this time and just go for it and let them learn on the job, and the ins and outs of that, and the difficulty of such little prep time for the British national teams and so forth. And yeah, interesting to see. They could do okay, they could get promoted, but I don't know how we'd fare in Division 1 if we did get promoted. So short term there's a chance. I think goal scoring is going to be an issue. Long term, still the same old problems exist, especially if Ben Bounds gets hurt, because we just don't have anybody capable of stepping in for Ben, which is a shame. But again, it's not a new issue. It's something we've dealt with for a long time now, and it was Lyle and Murphy for a long time, and occasionally guys like Watkins were around to step in as well, and we had odd years with guys like Craze and Lehman, but mainly it was Lyle and Murphy, and then it moved to Murphy and Bounds, and I guess when Murphy packs in, I don't know. People are talking about John Baston at Basingstoke, which Baston's a fine goaltender, but it doesn't address the issue, which is that British goaltending just isn't investing enough time and money in the position in recent years. And I know guys like Nathan Craze and Ewan King and Boundsy himself are trying to change that and do coaching projects within their respective clubs' junior systems and camps and schools and clinics and all sorts. But it's not always as simple as that. Sadly, you need ongoing support and time and the ability for young goaltenders to put into practice what they learn when they go on these camps. So I think that's as much a personal frustration as anything with former membership of the Goaltenders Union, that we give such little time and what's the word I'm looking for? Respect, maybe, to the position, which can make such a big difference, especially at the top level, where even though Cardiff, were in a good position maybe to win the league and have lost out slightly, they've still enjoyed the ability to ice that extra import skater because they've got someone like Ben Bounds in net. And people have sort of said he's had a dip in form recently. Well, he's still been one of the better netminers in the Elite League all season, and people love that and praise him for that. But there doesn't always seem to be a lot of desire to drive for the next Ben Bounds, and there isn't necessarily an obvious one in the system right now to be the next Ben Bounds, to move up and play Premier League as a number one for a few years, especially with the trends moving towards import goaltenders in the EPL. Ausins, Baston, Hydlovsky, was it Ulberg who was at Guildford, and Sheffield have had one on and off for many years. They had Pazzi before Bounds, and then is it Sedlar they've got there now. And that's, we're going to be looking at more than probably half the EPL teams next year running with an import goaltender, I suspect. Especially if rumours that they're going to move to 5 or 6 imports are true, and I've heard that 2 or 3 times now from different people that it's going to move to 5 or 6 import league. And that's troubling to me, I think, because I don't think that's sustainable, especially the way things have been for Bracknell and Manchester this year, and there's every chance we might lose them in the summer anyway, or they'll drop down to the National League or similar, and I don't know what that does to the National League necessarily. If Bracknell move to the NIHL and maybe merge with the Bracknell team that are there now, the Hornets, to become Bracknell Bees NIHL, and do a little bit more with the juniors there, they could have a very competitive team at that level, but does that then push other teams in the National League down a peg, like Oxford, who've come on leaps and bounds, or Solent, or I don't know. It's a very loaded debate that all spirals off from every Team GB announcement it seems, but here we are, and I'd say that debate's probably going to come up again in the very near future, and many times over, I'm sure. So, but enough about the British game. Let's move across to the NHL for a little bit. And the Pittsburgh Penguins on a great streak right now. I think they've almost played themselves into a playoff place already. There's about 9 or 10 games to go, depending on which team schedule you're looking at. The Pens have been on an absolute tear, even without Evgeny Malkin, who's out for a few more weeks with, I think it's a wrist injury. Sidney Crosby's been brilliant, probably playing himself into the Hart Trophy conversation, and it's a good time to do it. Certainly during the truncated season that Alex Ovechkin started a bit slow, then went on an absolute tear through the second half of that shortened year and won the Hart Trophy, and you kind of feel like Sidney Crosby's maybe doing the same this year with the points he's been putting up, the way he's been playing, and he obviously had that very well-documented slow start, and people wondered if he was the same guy or if he had to adapt his game, and yeah, I admit I was one of them who wondered if he needed to evolve slightly to continue to excel, but whatever he's done, it's working. Whether that's down to Mike Sullivan coming in and taking the shackles off a little bit. A lot of people feel this team is playing with a lot more freedom under Sullivan than it did under Mike Johnston. It's working, and they're in the playoffs, and Fleury's had another good year, and the defence is looking okay. Health is still a big key for this team, especially guys like Letang, who are so important at the back. Justin Schultz might ease a little bit of the pressure on Letang if he can find his game after moving over from Edmonton at the deadline. But yeah, they're looking really good right now, and so are Anaheim in the West, which suddenly makes me feel a lot better, because my pre-season pick for the Stanley Cup final was Anaheim against Pittsburgh, which around Christmas looked like a terrible decision, whereas now actually it looks like it might be an okay choice. But yeah, interesting to see how they go. It certainly made life difficult for the New York Islanders, who have dropped into wildcard spots now. They're really in a fight with the Red Wings and the Flyers now, and the Islanders haven't been great. They've lost their last 4. The offense has tailed off a bit. John Tavares coming out saying he's not played as well as he needs to. Obviously, Halak injured. Thomas Greiss has been good as the number 2 goaltender this year, and I don't think that's necessarily a concern per se. It's the offense drying up like it has, and Ryan Strome hasn't kicked on as people expected. Anders Lee hasn't kicked on as people had hoped, and they didn't really add anyone significant either in the summer or at the trade deadline. Shane Prince is a solid player, but he's not a big addition in the sense of like adding a Bodka or even a P.A. Parento, who they were apparently talking to the Maple Leafs about reacquiring effectively. But anyway, yeah, the Islanders are in that dogfight, and I do wonder what happens with Jack Capuano if they miss the playoffs or if they go out early, because I think there's a lot of hope on this team this year, and his position becomes questionable, I think, if they miss out or do badly, because I've said this before on the podcast, he's a guy who I feel has set the table for someone else to dine out on. And I still feel that way. I feel like he's one of those guys who's going to put in the groundwork at a club, but you need someone else to come in to, really capitalise on that work. And we saw it in Pittsburgh a few years ago. Michel Therrien did take them to the final. They lost to the Red Wings, of course, and then the next season he lost his job partway into the year, and Dan Bylsma came in and the Penguins won the Cup. So, we've seen it before, and I ponder whether it's the same in St. Louis, and I guess this year we'll probably find out with Hitchcock whether he can take the Blues that next step, or they need a change, and they might need a change sooner or rather than later at the Blues, because some of their guys are getting a bit older now. There's a couple of expiring contracts, Backers for one. So interesting to see what the Blues do as well. And as I said, the Islanders is a curious one to me, just because they've stood by Capuano through what was sometimes a growing pains period for the club. Because they were waiting for younger guys to mature. We were waiting for the guys like Nelson and Strome and Pullock and so forth to really come through. Then they added the Halak, and all of a sudden you had a team which people felt could win, in the short to mid-term future. And then they put themselves in a good position this year, and it's sort of slipping a bit. So, Capuano's an interesting one. The Flyers have had a great turnaround after a difficult start under Dave Hackstall. Maybe it's a combination of his systems finally kicking in. He obviously had great success in collegiate hockey, and maybe it's now starting to transfer to the NHL. Steve Mason's been pretty strong for most of the year. Obviously, Noy Vefbeya isn't ideal in that respect, because they're going to lean quite heavily on Mason down the stretch. But interesting to see them kind of rebounding like this, and what they can do, and whether it's sustainable or it's just built up some false hope. And likewise, the Red Wings had a bit of a dip. Is this the end of that famous postseason streak that they've built up over the years? And you wonder, and I wonder what happens when guys like Datsuk and Zetterberg go. And I had a couple of Wings fans say that they don't believe Detroit are as heavily reliant on those sort of 2-3 key veterans as some people make out, and I would include myself within that, some people perhaps. But they were really struggled early on without Datsuk. There's no obvious big name ready to really take on those big roles that Zetterberg, Datsuk and Kronwall have played for the Red Wings over the recent years. Dylan Larkin's looking good. He's lightning fast, and Tatar and Nyquist and guys, they're good players and so forth. But those are big guys to replace, and it's sort of at a point where do you take a step back as the Wings and try and do some kind of soft medium rebuild to get a guy in? I don't know who. That's the problem. It's so difficult to do that now. And San Jose did it reasonably well with converting from Thornton and Marlowe's team to Pavelski and Couture's a couple of years ago with Burns in there as well. But it's interesting to see how the Red Wings approach that, and whether they are so doggedly determined to try and cling to this streak that actually long term becomes a little bit detrimental to them, because that's what they're trying to do. They're just trying to cling on to this streak all the time, rather than taking an objective step back to take 2 forward down the road. So interesting what happens at the Joe Louis, especially with the new rink coming as well, because also there's financial implications for the team involved with that. Out west, it's really a 2-horse race now. I think Nashville are closer to Chicago for third in the Central than they are to Colorado, who are in the second wildcard spot. So it's really a battle between the Avs and Wild for that second wildcard spot. And I wouldn't like to necessarily say who's going to win it. Thomas Vanek's going to be a healthy scratch again, apparently, for the Wild. Nicholas Backstrom, kind of a nice little story there. He'll start for Calgary on Thursday against the Wild. He hadn't played for 14 months before. Was it Monday he played, or Sunday, sorry? He won, so it's a nice story for him. He's 38 years old now. I suspect he still probably retires in the summer, but if he has a good little run at the end, does he wonder? Is he UFA? Calgary desperate for someone to do something between the pipes from this year, and if Backstrom does it for the next sort of 6 or 8 of their last games, does Brad Treliving think about giving Backstrom like a 1-year deal, and maybe going with Backstrom and Ozio, and then obviously they've got John Gillies in the system, McDonald as well. So yeah, that's a little one. Again, I've kind of spiked off at a tangent here. That's an interesting story to follow. Is the Flames goaltending, just because they've been so bad in the crease this year. But anyway, the Avs and the Wild, it's a tough call. The Avs adding a couple of guys at the deadline there, Matthias, Galanis and Bodker, and McKinnon's been out for a little bit. I'm not sure what the timeline is in his return, and Duchesne missed a little bit of time as well. Not the best time to lose guys like that, but they're still in the mix. In the Wild, had a bit of a spike under Ticcetti when he took over from Mike Yeo, but then a lot of people are saying, well, now that spike's kind of settled, which inevitably it does after a new coach comes in. It's like this is the new guy, same as the old guy, so they haven't necessarily made strides forward on that respect. And we've basically got two teams battling for one playoff spot, and that doesn't really go. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens in those respective playoff races. Elsewhere, there's a few NCAA signings now. There's some good kids coming out of the NCAA, useful players coming through, and guys like Parise and Gaudreau and Miller. Garner most of the plaudits for coming out of the NCAA and flying that flag. But there's some useful guys been picked up down the years. Jordan Leopold was a Hobie Baker winner, and were it not for injuries, he probably had a better NHL career. And all these sort of guys who've come through the system, Hayes and so forth. They're very useful players, and it's become a pretty good little breeding ground for guys now, especially because they're coming to the NHL as 20, 21-year-olds. A little bit more life experience under their belt, so to speak. They've played with other young adults, and maybe they're in a better place to make the step from NCAA hockey to the NHL than guys are from maybe the Canadian junior leagues to the NHL at 18, and that sort of that need for it sometime in the AHL and so forth beforehand comes in, whereas the NCAA guys might be able to step in a little bit quicker, a little bit more, I say on the pace, maybe that's a bad term to use, but they're around, they're doing the rounds at the moment, and Pittsburgh have signed Guzman today. Guzman? The name escapes me, I apologise. They signed a kid, he was there when their draft picks in 2013, he's had a good year with the Omaha Mavericks, so yeah, it's that sort of season, and guys from Europe are starting to attract attention as well, and we're getting now to the point where those teams who are on the outside of the playoffs looking in are starting to think about these sort of moves and bringing guys over maybe for next season, or these younger NCAA guys who can help them moving forward, even just maybe as depth guys or similar, that what can they do to help us as a team. And so yeah, it's an interesting time of year for everybody really, especially the draft as well, and also the draft lottery is going to come in, and those teams that miss the playoffs have a chance to land one of those top 3 picks as well, so they'll have half an eye on who's doing what in the European leagues, with guys like Lane and Puliavi, as well as Austin Matthews. Obviously he's out of the playoffs in Switzerland now, Zurich shock first round exit, but he's going to be on a lot of people's radar just in case they land one of those top 2 picks, as well as some of the guys like Jacob Chikrin and what guys like that, and Kachuk and so forth are doing in the junior leagues, because they'll no doubt feature in the top 10 if not top 5. But a lot of fan bases and a lot of general managers, I think, pinning hope on getting a good pick, because it's been a rough year for some teams. You look at Winnipeg, Montreal, they're going to want excuse me, want something out of a torrid season. And obviously Toronto have, I think, consciously let themselves slide down a bit and giving some kids a chance latterly. I know people say it's not a tank if we're giving these kids a chance and winning and moving away from 30th, but at the end of the day, the Maple Leafs kind of consciously sank down the standings, and although there isn't a McDavid up for grabs this year, there's still some very good players, and you try to wash it that it's not a tank in the same way Buffalo did is misleading. It's wrong. It's not quite as brutal as the Sabres tank, but at the end of the day, they still consciously let themselves slide down the table to end up where they are now, towards the bottom end, and get a decent shot at a top 3 pick. So But that about wraps it up anyway, because my throat's getting a little dry now. Thanks everybody for listening. As always, you can find the blog, onepuckshort.wordpress.com. You can find me on Twitter at RobMcGregor35. You can email onepuckshort@gmail.com. You can also find my stuff on Today's Slapshot and In Goal magazine. And yeah, like us on Facebook, facebook.com/onepuckshort. If you want to contribute and help the show out with the running costs and hosting costs and so forth, there's a PayPal donation link on the blog as well. But for now, thanks for listening. I'll speak to you all again very soon.